thought I accomplished stuff while I was inside, but you started Death Row Records while you were in prison.
Maybe three years after I was in prison.
What was the journey for that? How did you have the idea of saying, hey, I'm behind these walls, but I'm still going to keep living and still keep contributing?
Well, you're young. I was 26 years old. You have a lot of energy. And sometimes you might get caught up in some misguided things. But at the same time, a lot of times we're better than we're worse. The best of us is better than the worst of us. And so I just felt like, in my particular situation, I was at San Quentin, and death row was a real thing back then. So people were younger than me, actually sentenced to death row. And so, I just thought the name was apropos because I just wanted people to know that some of the mischiefs that you get involved in can end you up here. And so it was more like a cautionary tale type situation that wanted to take the voice of the streets and give it, amplify it.
And you're here today, we're on the panel together talking about social media as a way to impact social change. What do you feel like has been the biggest impact since you received your pardon 4 years ago?
Well, I think social media has been great, like in terms of using music, because it's my background, to engage people in terms of concerts and just the community thing. And then being able to, not get caught up in politics, but more about policies, like things that can make a difference and people that's about making a difference and not just getting caught up in the wave. I think it's, I just think that it's important that you press people about policies that make a difference in everyday people's lives, incarcerated or in the streets. I just think sometimes we drift and we don't get focused about things that matter.
When I was 18 years old, just after my 18th birthday, I committed 2 crimes and I was sentenced to serve 32 years in prison. So I thought my life was over. And I was inside where I was lucky enough to have support and people who created opportunities for me to get an education, to grow, to help other people, and to basically become the person that I am. And after 19 years, I received a conditional pardon from the governor, and with an hour and a half's notice, went from waking up thinking I was going to be in prison for the next 10 years to walking out. And this was in the middle of the pandemic. There was nothing to do. There was nowhere to go. And somebody said, you need to start making videos. And I'd been taking orders from people for 20 years. Like, I didn't know how to make decisions. I didn't know how to choose body wash at CVS. So I started making videos and they started going viral. And then I had this platform where I was talking about things that were important to me, but I didn't think anybody else would care about. So I started talking about the prison system, talking about reentry, talking about the failings, talking about things that we really need to address. And I realized that most of the world doesn't know. Like, we don't know how messed up our prison system is. We don't know how bad it prepares people for release. We don't know how bad it basically further traumatizes people who are one day going to be our neighbors and our coworkers and our basically people in our community. So I had this platform, and all of a sudden I realized that there was a great opportunity to start highlighting this and start pushing for social change, policy change, basically looking at ways that we can actually make things better and we can make a positive impact. And again, this was totally accidental. I had no intention to do this. I didn't know what TikTok was when I made my first video. I thought it was dance videos. And next thing I know, I'm up on stage in places like this. And Tiffany invited me to come on a TikTok town hall to talk about the impact of that. When they were trying to ban TikTok, say, hey, this gave me a platform that nobody else would have given me. This democratized access to the world in a way that nobody ever has. And so I can tell stories and I highlight other people's stories in a hope that we can create a system that actually protects public safety rather than the really abominable system we have now.
And the ways that we need to reform it so that we can actually have a reformatory system and not just a punish system. What gives you the sort of like resilience and confidence to get out there and be that vulnerable and honest to tell your story? And has that helped other people tell their story too?
Yeah, so this is actually a lesson I learned in prison. I used to be caged by shame before I went to prison. As a kid, things that I experienced, things that happened to me, and I always felt like they made me less. But one of the things I learned in prison was if I tell you all the vulnerable shit about me, you've got nothing to hold over my head. So if I lead with the thing that I'm afraid of, you can't take anything away from me. So when I got out, I watched person after person try to hide their record or minimize their record or justify their record. And I said, hey, I'm just gonna lead with it. I'm gonna go into spaces and say, this is who I am, this is where I come from, and these are the lessons I learned from that. Because as we were talking about earlier, I go to the juvenile center to work a lot, and I tell the kids, you have so much more toughness than anybody out here. You think that you're at a disadvantage. When it actually comes to doing the work, you have such an advantage over everybody out here because you've been feeding yourself since you were 5 years old. These people don't have a fucking clue. So it's been really important to me to lead with that. And I didn't know what that would turn into. When I made my first video, I thought like 3 people in Charlottesville, Virginia would see it and that would be it. All of a sudden, when I was getting hundreds of thousands and millions of views, I realized there was something there. And the number of DMs that I've gotten from people, either people who are just as impacted, people who are struggling with childhood trauma, people who are struggling with experiences they had basically as victims of crime, all of a sudden I realized that there was a power in that. There was a power in leading by example. It doesn't matter what that example is, it's just the example of our past does not define us, and the things that happen to us do not define us. The things we've done, as long as they inform us and who we want to be moving forward, they only define the way that we want to improve and we want to make the world a better place. And by taking that tact, I've been able to connect with people that for the longest time have felt prisoners. They felt caged by their shame or felt caged by their past actions in a way that kept them stuck in a cycle that was destructive. So having the opportunity to connect with people and say, hey, it is okay to be you, and your experiences inform who you are and who you can be, and by realizing that you have great power, it's given me the opportunity to share something that I didn't think was gonna be significant, but it's allowed people to reach out and say, hey man, you changed my life. Like you gave me a place I didn't realize I was ever gonna have.
There were a number of people I was incarcerated with who I genuinely believed to be innocent. Some have since been exonerated, some have not. One of the heartbreaking things was watching their plea for innocence turn to anger and turn to vitriol, which was entirely justified. I mean, if someone locked you in a cage for days and then months and then years and then decades, and you knew you had done nothing wrong, how do you deal with that? And what I saw it break people. And it's really insane. Because if you think about this, if you say, okay, we're going to take all the people in society who, for whatever reason of mental health issues or trauma or addiction, can't function in society. We're going to lock them all the way together. We're not going to give them support or education or any real benefit. And then we're going to wonder why they come home and don't seem to function really well. It's ludicrous. The entire thing is ludicrous. And so what I saw was prison continually make people worse. And Michael and I were talking about this earlier, that there are people on the inside who are doing amazing things for themselves, for others in there, for people in the community. When I got to Buckingham Correctional Center, there was a civics group that was raising money for T-ball and for Little League in the community. That was their thing. They said, hey, if we're going to be back here, we want to find some way to give back. So we're going to do art projects. We're going to do things where we raise money because we want to contribute to the community. And that isn't talked about. We only talk about what did you say, when it bleeds, it leads? Yeah, we talk about that one person who gets out and does something horrible. We don't talk about all the people on the inside who are working to better each other in spite of the system. Because the system is not facilitating it. They're not in there saying, okay, we're gonna give you all the therapy you need and we're gonna help better yourselves and we're gonna help connect you. No, they're saying we're gonna lock you in a cage, stare at a wall and repent the things you've done, which isn't how anything in science, anything in psychology understands that it works. But people, in spite of that, in spite of a traumatizing environment, are getting better and are helping themselves and helping the people around them and helping the larger community. And that's the part that we don't talk about. And that's the part that to me is really extraordinary. Because I had a lot of support. I had people who reached out. I was able to get an education. I was able to become an electrician. I was able to do all these things. I saw people who got none of that and still somehow, day by day, became better people and are ready to be out in the world but won't get that chance because they don't have their certificates, because they didn't have anybody to pay for it, or they didn't have the access or support that allowed them to have it. So we really have this system that's based on punishment that is making people worse. And we have extraordinary people on the inside who are doing everything they can to overcome that and not getting the recognition or the opportunity of a second chance. And it's only, maybe they'll continue to do this for the rest of their lives. I think they would be entirely justified after 10 or 20 or 30 years of saying, you know what, I'm going to become full of hatred. I'm going to become full of vitriol because I've done everything. I've done everything right and there's no opportunity for me. And the people around me are getting opportunities because of what they look like or the people they know or the people they're connected with. What I want to see is an alternative to incarceration where it benefits not only the person who committed the crime, but it benefits the person who suffered at the crime. Because right now, we don't think about this, but if I steal money from you and I go to prison for 10 years, you don't get your money back. You're no better off. This doesn't actually address the thing that was done. Whereas restorative justice says, hey, let's get you your money back and then let's have a conversation. Let's talk about accountability. Let's talk about the changes we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, to make sure you feel secure in your house and your person and your property again, and then actually work to do that. There's a much higher rate of satisfaction through restorative justice. There's a much lower rate of recidivism or of basically recommitting a crime. It's a more effective system. The problem is there's no profit in there. There's nobody to benefit except for the people who've been harmed. Okay, well, that's what I think is more important. If I'm the victim of a crime, I think I should be the priority, but that's not what we have as a system right now. So I've been really grateful to be approached by the prosecutors in my area, to be approached by public defenders, be approached by the judges, be approached by the jail and the prison system, to say, hey, we want to do things a little bit better. And sometimes that's the system as it officially stands, and sometimes that's people on the inside fighting to try to make a difference and fighting to buck the trend of what's been going on. And I get to be a part of these processes because I've been very loud and very vocal about it, and I feel incredibly fortunate. because I have this opportunity to do something that actually makes an impact, because I, again, want other people to have those same resources, those same opportunities, and have that same support that I received, because I am no more deserving. And so every time I'm able to accomplish something along those lines, I feel like, okay, I got a second chance and I'm using it for a good reason.